The Young and the Restless spoilers. Victor and Nikki's arrival in Los Angeles was not one of relief or reunion but one of overwhelming grief and disbelief. They entered Noah's hospital room, their faces drawn with exhaustion and pain, only to be confronted with a heartbreaking sight. Their son, once full of life, hope, and ambition, now lay pale, unconscious, and fighting for breath on a sterile hospital bed. The monitors beeped in a steady, rhythmic pulse, too rhythmic for the frantic hearts of the parents watching their child's life hang by a thread. Victor's face twisted in agony, his steely exterior crumbling as he approached the bed. He reached out, placing a hand gently on Noah's, but there was no comfort to be found. Tears filled his eyes as he looked down at his son, his voice breaking through the silence. "Who did this?" Victor's roar echoed through the room, fierce and filled with an intensity that could have shattered the walls around them. His voice was no longer the calm, calculating tone of the Newman patriarch. It was the voice of a father in pain, a father on the verge of losing everything. He stood tall, his body tense with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. "I will find them," he swore, each word dripping with a cold promise of vengeance. "I will make them pay." Nikki's heart shattered as she reached for Victor's arm, her own tears flowing freely. She had never seen him like this. Never had she seen the man who ruled industries, who commanded the loyalty of armies of people, reduced to this broken state. Victor was usually unshakable, the master of every situation, every scheme. But here, in front of Noah, he was a father who had lost control of everything he held dear. Nikki squeezed his arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victor, we'll find out who did this. We will. But not like this. Not in blind fury." Victor turned to her, his eyes blazing with the fire of a man who had been pushed beyond his limits. "Blind fury?" "Nikki, you don't understand." His voice was low, gravelly, thick with the emotion he fought to keep contained. "This is no longer about business or power. This is about family, my blood. My son is fighting for his life, and whoever did this will pay." It was a chilling promise, but it was also a moment of clarity. Victor was not someone who relied on mere instinct like Nick, nor would he let emotion cloud his judgment. He was a man of strategy, precision, and resources. He had access to the best, an army of detectives, bodyguards, and informants. If there was anyone in the world who could unravel this mystery, it was Victor. No one in Genoa City could escape him. Victor wasted no time. He immediately mobilized his resources, calling in the best detectives he had at his disposal. The news spread quickly. Noah was in critical condition, and Victor was already on the hunt for answers. Nick and Sharon had mentioned Sienna and Mitch in their investigations, the two of them connected in some way to the mysterious accident that had left Noah clinging to life. Nick had been onto something, but Victor's mind was far sharper. Sharon and Nick had already surmised that Mitch was the one responsible for the crash, but they had no concrete evidence. Victor, however, was always several steps ahead. Mitch was on the run, hiding in the shadows, trying to keep his tracks covered. But Victor was relentless. He would not let a single stone go unturned. As Victor's detectives combed through every lead, every shred of information, one name began to resurface more and more frequently: Sienna. She appeared to be just another innocent bystander in the tangled web of lies, but Victor knew better. He knew that Sienna's story was not what it seemed. Her connection to Mitch was undeniable, and her evasions only made her more suspicious. Victor's gut told him she was hiding something that could tear the Newman family apart forever. With his mind made up, Victor did what he did best. He acted swiftly. He instructed his team to track down Sienna, and within hours, they had located her. He wasted no time. Victor appeared at her doorstep, his presence demanding attention, his determination impossible to ignore. He stormed into her home, every step calculated, every movement deliberate. Sienna's calm demeanor did nothing to soothe the storm brewing within him. She stood in the doorway, feigning ignorance, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew this was coming. Victor stood there, his gaze piercing through her. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stared, analyzing every inch of her, as if trying to decipher the truth hidden behind her calm exterior. And then, it hit him. There was something about her face, something so familiar, it made his heart lurch in his chest. A flash of recognition. The way her jawline, her eyes, the curve of her lips, it was unmistakable. Suddenly, the air between them shifted. It was no longer a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Victor's voice cracked through the silence, raw and trembling with emotion. No, it can't be. Sienna, is it really you? Sienna's eyes widened, and for the briefest moment, the mask of composure faltered. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She stumbled backward, her hand clutching the doorframe for support. Victor's gaze softened, but there was no mistaking the gravity of his words. "You're my daughter," he whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, but for Victor, it was both a revelation and a tragedy. "You've come back to me, but why? Why now?" The shock of the moment washed over him like a wave, and for the first time in years, Victor was overcome with emotion. He had been so sure, so certain, that the family he had fought for all his life had been solid, secure. But this was beyond his comprehension. Sienna, his own flesh and blood, standing before him, a stranger in a woman's body, was not the daughter he had thought lost forever. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't owe you anything, Victor. Not after what you did." The venom in her words hit him harder than he expected. The years of power and pride, the deals and betrayals, the cold manipulation that had defined him for so long, he was now face to face with the consequences. Sienna was his daughter, the child he had forgotten, the one who had been taken from him long ago. And in her eyes, he saw nothing but years of anger, resentment, and hurt that he had unknowingly caused. Sharon's arrival at the scene felt like a twist of fate. She stood at the doorway, watching this confrontation unfold. Sharon was a woman who had always believed in second chances, but even she could not deny the reality of what was happening before her. She stepped forward, trying to calm the storm between Victor and Sienna, her voice gentle but firm. "Victor, please," she said, her eyes locked on him. "This isn't the way." Victor didn't look at her. His focus was on Sienna, and Sienna alone. His heart ached, but he wouldn't back down. "You have no idea what this is like," he muttered. "My own flesh and blood, standing before me as an enemy." He turned to Sharon, his voice low but intense. "You don't know what it feels like to lose everything. And now it's all coming back. All of it." Sienna's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her defiance remained. "You lost me long before you ever knew who I was," she replied. The finality in her voice made Victor falter. His heart, too long hardened by power and decisions that had affected others, was now broken in a way it had never been before. The room fell silent, the tension between them unbearable. Nick's voice echoed in Victor's mind, reminding him of the clues that had surfaced about Sienna, Mitch, and the crash. But this moment, this revelation, was something much deeper. Sienna was his daughter, and the twisted path of revenge she had walked had been fueled by something much stronger than hatred. It was a thirst for justice, a justice that only a daughter could understand. Victor's world, once so meticulously constructed, was now in ruins. And it was only beginning. Victor's heart skipped a beat as he looked at Sienna, the revelation hitting him with the force of a freight train. It wasn't just her face that struck him, though it did, with its sharp lines and piercing gaze. It was the way she carried herself, the way her expressions shifted with a certain familiarity that sent a shiver down his spine. He had seen those eyes before. Sienna's face mirrored the one Victor had known long ago, years ago, when he had been a different man, vulnerable in ways he would rather forget. The resemblance was uncanny, but it was more than that. Sienna's face was hauntingly similar to that of Meredith, a doctor who had treated Victor many years ago during one of his darkest moments. Meredith. The name echoed in his mind like a soft, painful whisper. She had been kind to him, had healed him when his body was shattered, when he thought he would never be whole again. But it was never just physical healing with Meredith. There had been something deeper, an undeniable connection between them, something that lingered long after she left Genoa City and disappeared from his life. Victor had never been able to forget her. He had loved her in his own way, and her absence had left an empty space in his heart. Could it be possible? Could Sienna truly be Meredith's daughter? The thought seemed absurd, yet every instinct in Victor's body told him that he wasn't mistaken. There was too much history, too much hidden truth between them for this to be a mere coincidence. Sienna's face, her demeanor, even the way she carried herself, it was all too familiar. Meredith had left Genoa City years ago, but her memory had lingered, burned into Victor's mind as though she were still there, still healing him in ways no one else ever had. Victor's breath hitched as he stepped closer to Sienna, unable to pull his eyes away from her. He searched her face as if trying to see past the woman standing before him and into the shadows of the past. "Do you remember your mother's name?" he asked quietly, his voice thick with emotion. The question hung in the air, both simple and impossibly loaded with meaning. Meredith's name was something Victor hadn't spoken aloud in years, but now, it slipped from his lips, raw and unguarded. Sienna's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. She had been prepared for a confrontation, had anticipated the questions, the accusations. But this was different. There was something in Victor's voice, a vulnerability she hadn't expected, that made her pause. "I know who my mother was," Sienna replied, her tone flat but tinged with something like sorrow. "But that doesn't change why I'm here." Victor's chest tightened as he waited for her to elaborate. The silence between them stretched on, thick and heavy, until he could no longer stand it. "Do you know, Sienna, that your mother's name was Meredith?" He leaned in slightly, his voice soft but commanding. "Do you understand what that means?" For a moment, Sienna looked away, her face betraying no emotion, but the tension in her posture spoke volumes. She didn't respond immediately, but the way her jaw tightened and her eyes flickered briefly toward the door told Victor everything he needed to know. She knew. She had always known. "You're her daughter, aren't you?" Victor whispered, his words barely audible. "You've come here not just to seek revenge, but because you've been carrying this truth with you all these years." He paused, his heart hammering in his chest. "But why? Why would you want to destroy me, destroy our family? What do you think you'll achieve by bringing me down?" Sienna's gaze locked with his, her eyes hardening with a new intensity. "You have no idea what it's like to lose everything." Her voice was low, her words deliberate. "My mother was a victim of your world, Victor. You and your family destroyed her, just like you've destroyed so many others. Do you honestly think I'd just forget that? Forget her? Forget what you did to her?" Victor staggered back, his mind reeling. It wasn't just the fact that Sienna was Meredith's daughter, it was the raw pain in her voice that pierced through him. He could see the weight of her anger, the betrayal that had shaped her entire life. And for a moment, he understood her. Understood why she had come for him, why she had hidden herself in plain sight, why she had woven herself into their lives without anyone noticing. Sienna had spent her life living in the shadow of Meredith's pain, and now, she was standing in front of him, a living, breathing embodiment of the consequence of his own choices. The years of power, control, and manipulation that had defined Victor Newman's existence were nothing compared to the loss Sienna had suffered. And as much as it hurt, as much as the truth tore him apart, Victor couldn't escape it. He had been the architect of so much destruction. "Sienna, I never meant for this to happen." Victor's voice was strained, breaking under the weight of his own remorse. "I never meant for your mother to be hurt. You have to believe that." He took another step toward her, his hands outstretched in a gesture of pleading. "Please. Let me make this right." But Sienna stepped back, her eyes narrowing. "You don't get to make anything right, Victor." Her voice was cold, devoid of any warmth. You don't get to fix this. What's done is done. What you did to her, what you did to me, is unfixable. And now, I'm here to finish what she started. I'm here to make sure you understand what it feels like to lose everything. Victor's heart sank. There was no way to take back the years of pain, the mistakes, the betrayal that had been ingrained in his very soul. And now, there was no way to stop her. Sharon, who had been silently observing the exchange from a distance, could no longer remain in the shadows. She stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Victor's arm, her face full of concern. "Victor," she said softly, trying to pull him back from the edge, "this isn't the way. You can't fix the past, but you can try to move forward." But her words fell on deaf ears. Victor's gaze remained fixed on Sienna, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly helpless. Sharon turned to Sienna, her voice calm but firm. "This path you're on, Sienna, it won't give you peace. It won't bring your mother back." But Sienna's eyes were cold, calculating. "You don't understand, Sharon. You can't." "But Victor? He'll understand when everything falls apart. When the Newmans lose it all. When the empire he's spent his life building crumbles." And with that, she turned, her footsteps echoing in the room as she walked away, leaving behind only the promise of vengeance.